makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Ilhan Omar, one of the members of the squad, was confronted recently by a number of anti-war protesters, and this was a similar incident to one that happened to AOC just a couple of days before. However, I think Ilhan Omar's response to them was particularly good, very passionate, and very honest. And honestly, I found it a bit surprising. Now, to their credit, the squad has largely supported Ukraine throughout the entirety of the conflict. The caveat being that rather unfortunate letter that I made a video on, in which they apparently retracted. I'm not sure how much their involvement was in this over some other members of the Progressive Caucus, but aside from that little blemish, I think they've done a pretty good job. And when I say I'm quite surprised by Ilhan Omar, she's always struck me as being kind of the tankier of the at least from the original 4 or 5 members. Sort of the one that I found a bit more sympathetic to certain tanky-ish talking points, but you know, she went full on beast mode against these protesters. I'm going to explain why these people are not anti-war leftists. They're not leftists. So let's just watch this video.
You are supposed to be a progressive Democrat, anti-war. Anti-war. 80 billion to Ukraine is not anti-war.
Actually, it is very anti-war if it speeds up the war and reaches a peace that is satisfactory to Ukraine, which is the victim in this war. Remember, being anti-war does not mean that you're anti-all wars at all times. Being anti-war in the 1930s in the face of the threat of fascism made you a fascist apologist. It did not make you an anti-war. And I recently read a quote from a book on the French left, certain leftists who sympathized with Stalin and saw the alliance between Hitler and Stalin as a positive thing, were actually encouraging people not to shoot the Nazis when they rolled into France. So that tells you all you need to know about what these people really think. So no, you're not anti-war. Please do not conflate anti-war with being pro-Putin or, in its time, pro-Hitler. You have to be very much pro-war if that war is a war that is, its purpose is essentially the cultural genocide of a nation. So yeah, you can't be anti-war in the face of that.
Helping Ukraine defend themselves.
Ukraine is killing its own citizens.
Helping people
in the Donbass.
War.
So as one of my Twitter followers pointed out, sounded like he said the dumbass, which I guess speaks for himself. So anyone who brings up this Donbass talking point is absolutely, like, they're a dishonest actor. They're either incredibly stupid or they're a completely dishonest actor, because this is one of the favorite takes from the pro-Putin crowd, that Ukraine has been bombing its own citizens for the past 8 years in the Donbass. So that is not true. Okay, so it's not true because, first and foremost, Russia armed and assisted, materially assisted, with even Russian troops, the emergence of the separatist movement in Donetsk and Luhansk. So these were not this was not a separatist movement that existed before the events of 2014. They existed only after the Euromaidan protests. And this was done with the explicit intention, as Russia has done in other places, of fostering a separatist movement to destabilize the country that they are basically trying to. I mean, this is the essence of hybrid war, which Russia was particularly good at, unlike conventional war, which they're clearly not that good at. So this idea that the Ukraine has been, no, they've been fighting back against separatists who have been armed by your neighbor, supported by your neighbor, and in many cases with Russian units involved in the fighting. So this happened on numerous occasions, that Russian units were in Ukraine fighting with Russian separatists against the Ukrainian army. So Ukraine was defending itself very, very much legitimately. Were there civilian casualties? Yes, of course, like any war. The majority of so they also love to cite the 14,000 casualties supposedly caused by Ukraine in those 8 years of shelling the Donbass. The majority of those casualties, first and foremost, are military casualties from both sides. So it's about like 4,000 or 5,000 on the Ukrainian side, 4,000 or 5,000 on the separatist side, handful of Russian casualties as well included in the separatist side, and the rest, something like 3,000 or so, are civilians. And again, those civilians could have been killed from Ukrainian attacks, they could have been killed from separatist attacks. So this idea that Ukraine killed 14,000 people in the Donbass just because they were Russian speaking is false. And anyone who uses this talking point, you automatically discard them as a dishonest actor, automatically. And it's telling that even like some of the more subtle pro-Putin, I wouldn't say pro-Putin, more like anti-West or campist commentators, Ben Burgess, Nathan Robinson, even Branko Marcetic, which I think is the closest one to being like full-on pro-Putin. They don't use that talking point because it's so easily debunked and it's so obviously false that anyone who uses it, again, discard their opinion. They are not an honest actor.
We are helping little children like me that have been helped. So listen, unless you have not been paying attention to what is happening, there are millions of Ukrainians that have been displaced. There are piles of bodies that are being found in mass graves. There are little children whose lives are being lost.
By Zelensky! Yeah, by Zelensky in the Donbass.
Yes, because Russia has clearly shown itself to be a great protector of Ukrainian children by raping 4-year-olds, as was revealed in a recent UN investigation on war crimes that was published a couple of days ago. They literally they raped a 4-year-old. I'm not going to go into detail. I was about to describe this incident, but I'm not going to. Go read the report. Prepare to be appalled. That is, what about the hundreds, if not thousands, of children deported into Russia and given to Russian families? This is illegal by any standard of it. It's a disgrace. It's a war crime. They even admit to doing it. So I'm sorry. This whole argument, and I've criticized this from the very start of the war. This is the same argument as blaming a woman who wore a miniskirt and got raped, and it's somehow their fault. This is the same thing. These people do not ascribe responsibility to the country that is perpetrating the invasion, most of the destruction, and almost 100% of the war crimes. I'm not aware that Ukraine has been committing war crimes, aside from perhaps photographing prisoners of war, which is of dubious international legality, still quite harmless compared to what we saw in Bucha and Izium. And God knows what we'll see when Mariupol gets liberated and some of these other towns. So there is one side who is doing all this, and it's Russia. And they're not calling Russia out.
If you are someone like me that has been that child, you do not get to tell me what my votes mean and how I get to vote in supporting people who desperately need support.
Well done. Absolutely well done. Now, look who's sharing this video. A guy called Jose Vega. This is going to be important in a bit. Remember, and look, they describe anti-war protester. That's not an anti-war protester. We will see why. Look, she was part of the cowardly 30 who rescinded the letter calling for diplomatic talks with Russia. But remember this guy, Jose Vega. And this was Ilhan Omar's response. I'm sorry, you all aren't anti-war protesters. You are dangerous propagandists who are literally making a mockery of the anti-war movement. Yes, they are. And that goes all the way up to the Noam Chomskys. All the way up. These people are a disgrace to the left. And I wouldn't even say that they're a disgrace to the anti-war movement, because the anti-war movement has been a ridiculous sham for many decades now. I think it lost all its legitimacy, at least like from the Syrian war onwards, when they were basically cheering on Assad. And most of them had been cheering on dictators and other authoritarian regimes for way longer. So to the extent that the anti-war movement had a purpose during the Vietnam War, for example, or after the invasion of Iraq in 2003, aside from those, and this is like the low-hanging fruit, it doesn't take a genius to be against any of this, but anytime there's a foreign conflict that has any sort of nuance, or more importantly, involves the West not as the aggressor, or an anti-Western country as the aggressor, that's when their brains fizzle. They cannot operate in a worldview that is slightly more nuanced than US bad, not US is good. That's it. That's the extent of their brain capacity. And these people are idiots. They're idiots. Most of them are idiots. I mean, we call right-wingers idiots all the time for believing Russian propaganda, for believing QAnon, for believing all this crap. There are idiots on the left as well. Very, very intellectually limited people who cannot hold nuanced thoughts together. And this is the bulk of this movement nowadays, especially online. This is the grand majority of people commenting in favor of these protesters or criticizing the squad for supporting Ukraine. That's the majority of these people. And sadly, they are supported by an ecosystem of the online left that I would say is 90% pro-Russia or anti-West, however you want to say it. It's the same thing, really, in practice. It doesn't matter whether you call yourself pro-Russia or simply anti-Western imperialism. If the end purpose of what you're calling for is to strengthen Russian imperialism, then you are pro-Russia. And I say this to, again, the Ben Burgesses, the Nathan Robinsons, the Branko Marchettiches, and the David Besner from Jacobin as well, the Chomskys, the Vishnay, what's his name? The guy who co-wrote the Chomsky's recent book. They're all in this. They're all in this. It's the same thing. And it's sad. Anyway, like I said earlier, this was kind of a repeat of an incident that happened to AOC a while back. And let's watch this incident. This one, I think AOC's response was slightly childish, I would say. I thought it was kind of funny. It wasn't as passionate as like spot on as Ilhan Omar's, but let's watch this again.
Very classy. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Are running up the streets of New York because of people like you. Come on, AOC, answer the question.
Yeah. I can't even tell what they were saying, but yeah, this is ridiculous. And apparently they were saying homophobic stuff as well. We're yelling Westboro Baptist style anti-LGBT slogans. What do you think I'm going to do? Take them seriously? Yeah. Anyway, remember I said note the guy's name, Jose Vega? Well, this is why. Nefarious Filthy Bird, a sort of well-known Twitter account in the online left, did a bit of digging, some investigative work on these people. So it's with the AOC, but it's actually relevant because it's the same guy that we'll see in a bit. So, guy harassing AOC is a two-time Trump voter. He used this to advertise a LaRouche socialist event. The LaRouche Nazi socialist event has invited Trump and Tulsi. Jimmy Dore, Hinkle, Haas will be headliners. The event is how environmentalism equals bad. So there's one of these guys, Daniel Burke. So there was an October 15 Schiller Institute conference in New York City. Who else is going to be in this? Defeat Green Fascism. Now, the Schiller Institute is organized by this LaRouche movement, which I'm going to show you the Wikipedia description, because I hadn't heard of these people until this came out. And it's led by Helga Zepp LaRouche, so apparently some relative of the original LaRouche. And here's the motley crew of your typical online tankies. Jackson Hinkle, Haz Al-Din, Samira Khan, and they're all against environmentalism. So, what's the LaRouche movement? Political and cultural network promoting the late Lyndon LaRouche's ideas. It originated within the radical left student politics of the 1960s. Suspicious, much like the online left to far right pipeline that we're seeing now. In the 1970s and 80s, hundreds of candidates ran in state Democratic primaries on the LaRouche platform. So yeah, they're pretty much sort of like left-friendly Nazis. That's, I guess, the best way to describe them. And I mean, it's not surprising that these people have ended up coalescing with the tanky left. So, you know, there is an element of the far right that finds a way of being appealing to the left, and in recent years has successfully seduced a huge amount of people who otherwise would have been like genuine anti-Nazis. But now these are the people who basically feel that a red-brown alliance is needed to electorally defeat the establishment, and they're happy with being on, you know, Nazi podcasts and following Nazi Twitterati or YouTubers, etc. But then when it comes to Ukraine, it's like, oh, there's no, we can't support Ukraine because Azov. We can't give money to the Nazi Ukrainian regime, which is, again, really funny that they have such a tolerance for Nazis when it comes to domestic policies, but complete no to any suggestion of assisting Ukraine just because there are Nazis in Ukraine, which there are. I mean, I'm not going to. I've had arguments on Twitter with people who are trying to whitewash the fact that, like, Azov aren't all Nazis. Yeah, maybe they're not all Nazis, but, you know, you got to recognize that this is originally a white supremacist movement. So I'm not trying to whitewash any of this, but, you know, what I once said to a Greek guy former friend, who you can imagine why the former bit, who kept arguing, using this line against the Ukrainian Azov and neo-Nazis. And I was like, well, if Greece was led by Golden Dawn and Turkey invaded it with the intention of turning it into a Turkish province and, you know, culturally eradicating Greece as an independent nation and an independent culture and people, would you still not support Greece in that endeavor of fighting back just because it was led by Golden Dawn? And the answer, of course, is yeah, I think any sensible person would still defend Greece, even if it was led by Golden Dawn. You know, you would sort out the Nazi problem later. You can't sort out the Nazi problem if your country ceases to exist, which is the argument I would give with Ukraine. And certainly Ukraine does not have a Nazi problem. That's sort of like in the grander political aspect of it. Yeah. So let's continue the investigation here. So yeah, LaRouche, but yeah, here's the guy again, Jose Vega, who retweeted this Daniel Burke tweet. I want to extend an official invitation to Donald Trump to come to the Schiller Institute in New York City. So the Schiller Institute is the LaRouche Institute, basically. I mean, if you read, go to Wikipedia. I don't want to like read the whole thing because it's going to be boring. But if you have time, go and look at this article on Wikipedia. It's actually frightening how organized these people were and still are. Like, this is an entire network of like their own think tank, political organization. Like, this is like serious shit. And there we have Jose Vega again, who's blaming the president. I voted for Trump twice. Very committed anti-war leftist, isn't he? Pompeo needs to go before he starts a war with Iran and leads on to World War III. But he voted for Trump twice. What does that tell you? I mean, can you really be a committed anti-war leftist and vote for Trump twice? Seriously? I mean, you can't. You can't. So this tells you everything you need to know about who these people are.
You are supposed to be a progressive Democrat.
He actually has exonerate LaRouche on his Twitter bio. Just wow. Yeah, there you go. That is why I repeat, there is no principled leftist position that isn't thoroughly, and I would say near unconditionally, in support of Ukraine. There isn't. And it's a crying shame that so much of the left has fallen for all this campus bullshit. And it's just given another avenue for so many leftists to end up sympathizing with the far right. Domestically, this was a problem in the last couple of years. We saw it as people like Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, all these others gravitated from leftist spaces to the far right, and so many people online followed them. So it was a problem with domestic politics. But now this year it's been a problem with foreign policy, because it opened up another avenue for these people to move to the far right. And especially now that the far right in the US, much of the Republican Party is against supporting Ukraine. Obviously, they want to be on Daddy Putin's side, because Russia has materially assisted the far right cause in the U.S. So, they are grateful to their benefactors. Don't fall for this crap. Be smart. Be nuanced. Foreign policy is a messy affair. It often involves taking sides with lesser evils. Clearly, in this side, NATO and the West, I think, are definitely not doing this benevolently in any way. I think it's a very self-interested conflict. It is indeed a proxy war, and it is indeed wrapped around grander geopolitical aspects. But here's the thing. A Russian victory is not going to make the West weaker. If anything, it's making the West stronger. It's gotten NATO to enlarge, thanks to Sweden and Finland. It has gotten countries like Germany to rearm. It's gotten countries like Poland to rearm. Poland is now going to be a significant European military power, thanks to this war. And of course, it's going to end up boosting the US defense budget for the foreseeable future. So how does this all make the West weaker? It doesn't. And given the significant erosion of Russian combat capability, we're not going to see Russia significantly challenging the West anytime soon. So, if ever, because economically they're, a minnow compared to the West. So, Putin just screwed up big time. Just one of the most idiotic geopolitical decisions taken in the past century or two. And there is just no way that you can side with this, especially since the manifestation of this geopolitical disaster has been, from a human standpoint, absolutely disastrous for the Ukrainian people, which I think as leftists, it is our duty to empathize with countries and with people who are being invaded, subjugated, starved, raped, bombed, shelled, for no fault of their own, their only sin being that they wanted a different set of friends. So there you have it. Don't fall for these clowns. And good job for Ilhan Omar. I think her response to this was brilliant. It seemed incredibly honest and passionate. And I think that is how you deal with these people who aren't anti-war leftists. They are neither anti-war nor are they left. On that note, if you like this video, please like, please share, please subscribe. Watch my previous video on the letter that they sent to Congress, where I have some further criticisms of the anti-war left. And I will see you next time.